Okay, good morning. Welcome to meditation class. Let's start as we do every week by we set our intention and make aspirations by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering, in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. Okay, it looks like there's a bunch of new people this week. If you're new, welcome. We just really started a couple of weeks ago this new year, so we did a full review. The first class of this year, which was a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe the 15th or 16th. So if you are new, I'm not going to go through a very specific, detailed, full review because we don't do that every week, but you can go to YouTube, Michael Imperioli Meditation 101. I think that's it. I can never remember the YouTube name. Nick, if you could put that up again, I'm really sorry. The classes are archived there, so you can go to the YouTube and look at the first class of the year. And get a really detailed technique. Meditation with Michael Imperioli is the YouTube channel. Okay, so we're gonna meditate. Victoria's gonna speak a little bit, and then there's a Q&A function in the Zoom toolbar. So if you have questions, you can ask them. We'll get to some questions towards the end of class. For those of you who are new, this is a meditation class, but also a basic Buddhism discussion kind of group. And Victoria and I practice in Tibetan tradition of Buddhism. It's not the only tradition, obviously, but that's what we've been taught, and that's what that's our approach, and that's what we share. We basically share what we've been taught. Let's get to the practice. The first thing we do when we're here, so you're seated comfortably. If most of us are on a cushion. If you're in a chair, make sure your feet are on the floor and your back is straight. Let's just take a few very simple breaths. Easy. We don't do too deep. We don't do shallow, rapid. Just relaxed breath. And we start by doing something that called the 9 purifying breaths. And what we do is we make this thing called the Vajra fist. So the thumb gets tucked in. And we take our right hand and we cross it, which we're supporting our right elbow with the left hand, and we go to the left nostril. We're breathing in to the right subtle body channel. So there's 3 subtle body channels. The blue one is the one in the middle. Traditionally in men, the white one's on the right, the red is on the left. All these channels meet around the navel, and they run parallel and adjacent to the spine, and they loop above the head, around and connect here. So we're going to breathe into the right channel. And then breathe out. The white channel is associated with the negative emotion of anger, right? Afflictive emotion of anger. And we're clearing that out. One more. Switch. And now we're breathing into the left. So in my case, it's the red channel, which is associated with attachment. Attachment kind of meaning desire, greed, or envy, jealousy, those kind of things. Keep the Vajrafist, put it on your knees. We're going to breathe both nostrils into the central blue channel, which is associated with ignorance. And by ignorance, we mean not knowing our true nature, basically, and not knowing the truth of things. Second. On this third and final breath, or ninth breath total, you can imagine the breath going out the crown of your head, merging your consciousness with space, and then take that right into meditation. If you are very new, you can work on focusing your attention on the place between your nose and upper lip, nostrils and upper lip, where the air is moving back and forth. As you breathe, you focus your attention there. When you notice yourself thinking, you say back to the breath in your mind, and you put your attention back. The key is to become aware of thinking. Relax, focusing your attention on the breath, where it moves, thought arises, whatever the thought is. Could be an emotion as well, or a sensation. The key is to become aware that it has arisen, and when you become aware, you go back to the breath. You can say that almost like a mantra, almost back to the breath. We're not pushing the thoughts away. We're not following and entertaining them. We're not judging them. We're not judging it's bad that they came up. We're not meditating properly. We're just noticing the thought has arisen and then using that attention to bring our attention back to the breath. We also use the visualization of the mind being settling into the nature of our mind, the true nature being represented by a clear, limitless, stainless, open, spacious, calm blue sky. We settle into that, trusting that our mind ultimately is that, has that nature, has those qualities, and resting in that, connecting it to it, trusting it, that it's there. When you clear out all the debris. And the thought is like a cloud that arises in the sky. And when we're aware that that thought, that cloud has arisen, we let it go. We watch it dissolve back into the sky, leaving no trace, no stain, not altering the sky or the sky-like nature of mind at all. And then the next thought can arise, will arise. And we apply the same technique. Settle back into that calm, clear, limitless, stainless, sky-like nature of mind. Sometimes it might take you quite a long time to realize you're thinking, and quite a lot of thoughts have gone by before you realize it. That's all okay. The key is to become aware and then apply the technique back to the breath or the cloud dissolving. Back to the breath. And you settle your body, you settle your breath, you settle your movements, you settle your mind. That calm arises naturally. That spacious arises naturally because it's there. We're not manufacturing it, we're not creating it, we're not fabricating it, we're just clearing away the obstacles to it. If you need a deeper breath, take one and then go back to the even breath. If you need to shift, settle back into the posture. Okay, excellent. Once again, if you're new and you want to really see the detailed explanation of these techniques, the posture, which we go into great detail about, and the techniques themselves, uh, YouTube Meditation with Michael Imperioli, and look at the first class of 2023. I believe it's like mid-January. Um, Victoria is going to speak for a bit, and again, there's a Q&A function in the Zoom toolbar. You can ask a question if you like, and if we can have an answer, we will, share it.
So for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about constructs and, of course, the way that our mind operates. Keeping in mind that Michael and I and all of us are here only really to explore our mind, and because that is where Buddhism always starts. Buddhism always starts right here where the mind is. We are the locus of the examination. It's not something doctrinal, it's not something exterior. What we sit down as practitioners to know, and the instructions and teachings that we get from our teachers, is to be able to peer inside and to see how the mind works. This is what Buddhism really is about, is learning how our mind operates. And in that context, we discuss other things like karma and other kinds of things. So let's take an ordinary experience and just see, where our mind takes us and what kind of patterns we habituate and live in. Let's take a hypothetical scenario. We're looking to buy a new house. We're with our broker. We stand on the driveway of a beautiful house, and on that driveway next to our neighbor's house grows a tree. It's a beautiful tree, and I fall in love with it, and I want to buy a house because I love this beautiful tree. When I get out of the car, I look at the tree, I experience it. I just stand in front of it. I experience it through my senses. I see the color, I smell its bark, I feel the wind, I hear the leaves, I smell it, etc., etc. I experience the tree. So the five senses are fired up. And then my mental consciousness, which can take the color and the form and say, this is a tree, which can hear the leaves and say, this is the tree, which can smell the bark and say, this is a tree. So all the five senses fired up together with mental consciousness, an image of this tree arises. But truly what happens is me experiencing this tree. I am in front of it and I'm open to it and I'm experiencing it. And now I love this house because this beautiful tree grows on my driveway, or my potential driveway. I buy this house, and next door to me lives a man. His name is Bob. And first we have a beautiful relationship, and then one day that person, Bob, in the course of our conversation says, "You're an idiot to me." And suddenly that person, who used to be my beautiful neighbor, Bob, and this tree is now polluted with my experience of him calling me an idiot. And suddenly I'm thinking, this tree is 3 inches more on my property, and it's 3 inches less on my property, so it's his tree. And from that stupid tree fall the leaves, and now I have to rake them. The shadow of this tree is overwhelming my windows, and I hate this tree. And the origin of all this is because my neighbor Bob said to me I'm an idiot in the course of conversation. So we can see how our initial experience of the tree, me standing in front of it, experiencing its fullness and beauty, experiencing its shade, etc., now turns into this conceptual construct of I hate it. It's infringing on my property line. I have to rake the leaves, but it's really his responsibility. And why do I have to? And suddenly this beautiful experience turns into this construct of something that now every time that I look at it, I am triggered and I can't stand it. It reminds me, very in a subtle way, reminds me that this tree is now connected to my neighbor Bob, whom I now hate because he said that I'm stupid one day. But so the entire experience is now altered, and we no longer sense the tree. We don't see its beauty. We don't smell its bark. We don't experience it any longer as a tree. That has been overshadowed completely by this afflictive emotion that had arisen upon this contact, where my ego got attacked by my neighbor saying, "You're an idiot." At the same time, I hate this person, my formerly beautiful neighbor Bob, because that day he said to me, "You're an idiot." And now I am frozen in my experience of the tree as this thing that infringes on my property, that I hate because I have to rake the leaves, and the neighbor that's connected to it, my formerly beautiful neighbor Bob, because that day he said to me, "I hate you." And if we really examine most of our experiences, experiences of the world, of our environment, are very much are structured as these removed, remote, long time occurred experiences. In many cases, I will look at many trees and re-experience the same kind of a thing, like it's a bother. It's something that you have to rake the leaves. It's something that, the branches cover the light, etc., etc. So I may very often no longer experience the tree directly. I may not experience the beauty, the smell, the shade, etc., of being present to it directly. So what I'm trying to outline is the difference of when we are initially present to the tree, when the initial experience takes place, and then that construct that we have created based on the affliction that arose in us. And now we are only reacting every time we see that tree or other trees. We're just bringing up, regurgitating that taste of the afflicted thought. This tree is a pain in the butt. It's on my property line, or, it's a tree where I have to take care of it. I have to rake the leaves. I can't stand this whole thing. I wish it wasn't here. And so we are re-experiencing really just the construct of our mind. We're no longer experiencing the tree. We're also no longer experiencing the neighbor Bob. We have stagnated him permanently in this one moment where we experience something painful from him, and now we hate him. To us, he's not the former neighbor, smiling neighbor Bob that we liked, but he's that hateful guy who said to me, "You're an idiot." We're not thinking that maybe that day Bob lost his job, or maybe he lost his mother, or maybe he lost his child and he was not in control of his emotions. All we experience is that he told me I'm an idiot and now I hate him. So all we experience is that construct of Bob as this thing that I can't stand. We're no longer available to experience him again and fresh. All we experience is just the construct of our mind. The same as when we look at that tree. From that day on, the tree became frozen in that construct. And we are no longer experiencing the tree or the neighbor. All we experience is the construct. And really, the reason why I'm blabbing about it at such length is that if we experience the contents of our mind, most of the things that we think that we are actually experiencing are just these constructs, these solidified in time, frozen kinds of things. But experience is really never like this. If I go to the same river, do I ever step into the same river twice? When I say I swim in the same river, it's only the name that's stagnant. It's only the label that is static. The water of that river, even from minute to minute, from second to second, it is already changed. Only the label and that construct that I call that river over there, or the river by its name, that remains. But most of our experiences of the world are just these constructs. All we get every time we look at things are just these constructs. For us, a chair is just a chair. It's not something new. Every other chair is just a chair. Every other tree is just a tree. It's just a construct. We are no longer available and experiencing it moment by moment. Most of our life takes place within these kinds of constructs. Personality constructs are constructed also the same way. It's our energy moving through the world and in conjunction with circumstances inside it when we're interacting with it. We solidify these constructs. So, for example, we take Bob, he's a child, he goes to school, he's a poet, but in the kindergarten, because he's sensitive and he's kind of a poetic person who looks at things in a very kind of a way of a fantasy with this mental openness, people make fun of him. They consider him a weakling. People maybe attack him because of his sensibilities and sensitivities. So this little Bob, he learns how to he learns to hate this part of himself, and now he wants to construct a shell that will protect him from these attacks. He will deny this level of sensitivity. Now he's going to decide, no, I'm not going to be a poet when I grow up. I'm going to be a banker. So this Bob, creates an alternate kind of a persona and no longer wants to have access to seeing the world in this flux, and it's through the sensitivity and sensibility that was innate to him to begin with. Now he's going to be this tough guy who's going to get only good grades and move along in the world along a trajectory that he's now chosen, this kind of a frozen land trajectory. And this Bob is going to go to school and pass through the high school, go to college, and he will forget his poetic inclinations, and he will be this banker guy. I'm not saying that bankers are bad or anything like that. I'm not making any kind of judgment. I'm just talking about constructs, how we construct things. And now Bob's identity no longer has any kind of a trace of being a poet. He's all tough. He's all a go-getter. He's in college, he's still on the same trajectory. He only associates with people who are on the same trajectory. He's going to enter into life from that trajectory. He's going to go in the office. He's going to get a certain position. And now Bob becomes, the big banker. He's the head of the biggest bank, et cetera, And Bob is no longer available to the part of himself that is not this construct, that is not this conglomerate. Bob may bring that banker Bob person home and act the same way with his children and with his wife, the same way that he deals with his employees. He may bring that certain harshness and dominance. And every so often, Bob will experience anxiety because his sensitive part of his nature will every so often will regurgitate this experience. Maybe I am too harsh. Maybe I've made my money on foreclosures and making people homeless. Maybe there's something wrong with that, and that initial nature, that open, sensitive nature, maybe emerges from time to time and knows it. So Bob will start to drink, or he'll take drugs, or he'll go to a therapist and blame his mother or others or some, his first boss. But that little sensitive nature will arise ever so often, and maybe less and less and less. What the result of that sensitive nature in Bob's life may remain just as this little shadow that has to be suppressed and pressed down. And in the end of the life, Bob lives in this great mansion. Bob has attained all the things that he thought on his trajectory that are important. And, time comes to die. And, what has Bob attained? Bob doesn't even know who Bob is, because he kind of stumped out all of the truly kind of the true sense of Bob, because Bob has lived for years and years in this kind of a trajectory. Whatever identified Bob as this big banker or whatever construct that he's lived in. Because to get to that place, Bob had to really subdue and subvert any kind of feeling and any kind of like being present. And at the end of the life, everything that Bob worked for very, very hard, he cannot take it with him. you know, he will have to pass into the next life, and all the stuff that he built on for all these years at the cost of subverting and subduing any kind of sense of sensitivity and the moral kind of a sensibility. He's worked so hard to put it down, to almost to annihilate it, so he can get to that place of being the successful Bob living in a big house with 20 cars, where he goes to the auto shows and he interacts with other bankers and etc. Sometimes to die. And Bob has all this anxiety. He doesn't really know who he is. And I would venture to say that when we act in that way, and when we stop being available to the world, but we're only living in these kind of constructed, mentally constructed realities, which are which are completely given to us, imposed on us by social norms, by us trying to fit in, by us trying, and basically we're doing, us and squirrels and other, sentient beings on this planet, we're just trying to through being driven by pleasure, but being driven by desire, we're seeking what is pleasurable, what we think is going to give us happiness, and we're trying to avoid what is going to give us pain. Like being Bob the poet is painful, because being open to things often can be that way. We are open to other beings' pain, like our neighbor that day. Instead of taking our construct, he's this horrible person who called me an idiot, maybe for a minute we'll open up to his pain and ask ourselves, well, why did he say that? Was there an event in his life that he said that to me? Most often we don't go that route. We don't want to stand and be present to other people's pain. We just want to create a construct, and now we will live with that construct that we will impose on that person. We'll give ourselves a right to create an image of a person, a definition of the person, as if we know them. But that person is just like us. It's just like the river we step in that changes from moment to moment. We're not frozen beings. In the same day, we become 20,000 different people. In one moment, we feel happy. At another moment, someone said something unpleasant to us, and suddenly we stiffen and we become someone else. Then we get defrosted and we feel again. We are a movement of energy. And what I'm trying to say in this long roundabout way is there are really two ways of being present, being in the world. One is this truly being present and knowing our energy, doing it as openness, which is what the mind really is in its nature. Mind is this vast openness, which is often referred to as emptiness, because it's unobstructed. Thoughts, experiences arise unobstructedly, and as they arise, they fall back, like the waves in the ocean. But the nature of mind is this base of the ocean, which is always ready to be aware of the experience, receive new information, receive new things coming and going, receive phenomena and others coming and going in and out of our life, receive our own information about our feelings and emotions. That is one way, being open, being receptive, being present. And the other way is living through constructs only. And when we live through constructs only, we don't really know who we are and what we are. Because if you strip away Bob the banker and the employee interactions and the schooling and the this and the that, we still can't find Bob, because Bob, the being of Bob, is being aware of one's own inner states, being present to oneself, being present at all times. And I would also venture to say that when we are present, which is the whole point of what we learn and call practice and meditation in Buddhism, is trying to be present, trying to be aware. And what are we trying to be aware of? That we are present, that we are open, that we are sensing, as opposed to being deluded by constructs, and constructs becoming thicker and thicker and thicker. We can no longer even remember who we are. That's why when we have anxiety attacks, we don't know the cause or the place from which they arise. Actually, we can't really know completely the cause and the place because we experience things in such openness, we're ungraspable. We cannot really grasp neither others nor objects nor ourselves. Our nature of all things is ungraspable. We can only experience it directly. Putting a label and putting a construct, it's, it's nothing. It's just us looking out at the world and seeing our own mind reflect back. It's just our narratives. We're not dealing with the reality. We're just dealing with the narratives of our mind. But I would venture to say that if we can be aware of our mind being open rather than closed with these superimpositions, living through these constructs, if we can be present upon the experience of being present to things, wisdom can arise. The constructs never give us wisdom. They give us maybe an ability to manipulate and behave badly, or behave in certain kinds of ways where things are kind of, we can squeeze them out for pleasure and this, but we can never get wisdom if we are not present to things. And when we're present, we can detect the energy of the other person and the energy of the world around us. But we can also detect our own energy as it arises. So if someone said something and my ear heard, my whole sense apparatus of the ear, my auditory perception, got the sound, and the sound got interpreted as these hurtful words, and I can sense the energy of anger arising, if I am present at that moment, I can see the stirring and the disturbance of my mind, of my clarity, and I can wait it out, and I can watch this fluff rising, and I can wait it out until the fluff dies down. I don't have to construct these mental rigidities, which I will later superimpose on things and never be able to see past them. And I will superimpose these every time when a similar kind of a thing triggers me. I want to be open. I want to be present. I want to be available to when things come into my field of experience. I also want to know when things arise inside me. I want to know it so that I can decide, do I want to act on this anger? Will I let it out like an animal out of a cage? And then pretend through my construct that it's not my anger, but it's that guy who's at fault. He's a terrible guy. Our teacher always says anger is always our enemy. It's never the person. It is always the afflictive emotion that is our enemy. Because that person, we can leave that person be just as they are with the memory that it's a passing state, that person right now may be exhibiting these kinds of traits and appearing in this and this kind of a way. We don't know what triggers it and why, the conglomerate of causes and conditions that produces that reaction in that person right now. But what we have to be mindful of, we have to let that person be, and we have to watch our own emotions. We have to make sure that we don't become that hateful thing whose words are now, through that energy of hate, are twisted into horrible things, and that it like fire spreads from inside and burns everything that I touch on the outside. And that's really what practice is. It's not sitting on the cushion. We sit on the cushion because we give everything to the practice of knowing our mind. But that practice is meant to be used in the world on a moment-to-moment basis with ourselves and with perceiving others, being available to them and making sure that when we're open and available to them, that we're not doing it through disturbances of the 5 afflictive emotions. And so I would also kind of just want to conclude that being present is this kind of an open mind situation. We just feel the flux, the ebb and flow of things coming and going out of our awareness, the open field, infinitely open field of our awareness. as opposed to when we think we know things, that obscurity and opaqueness of when we have decided that we know the thing, we know that person, we know what this is, and we're just, working through these superimpositions upon our mind, which cloud and really don't allow us the availability of being present. For sure, when we're present, we can have wisdom, we can have decisions that are based on clarity, rather than when we say we know and we work through the superimpositions of constructs. We only work with these fixated and stiffened and kind of like solidified, in many times afflictive kinds of mental states. So it's, the two ways of how our mind can be is being open and fresh and experiencing, or this, what in Buddhism is considered the deluded mind, because conceptual mind, super elaborative conceptual mind, is in Buddhism considered the mind of delusion. So being aware of these two possibilities in every moment available to us.
Thank you very much. We'll take some questions. I was punched while taking pictures and didn't hurt the person back. I've trained in martial arts and felt I had presence of mind to not react with rage. Was this the right thing to do? It seems like you feel that it was the right thing to do. If you had presence of mind to not react with rage, and that's how you chose to react, saying what's the right thing to do is a little tricky, because it's not just about you doing the right thing, right? It's like what's happening in this situation, right? At some point, you may be in a position where you have to defend somebody. You know what I mean? I think if you walk away and you feel like you understand the situation, this person is mentally ill or this person's possessed by rage and he lashed out for whatever reason, and you had some kind of equanimity in the moment and can see that and walk away from it without harboring some kind of feeling of, nagging feeling of victimization and weakness and that kind of thing, then maybe that's a positive outcome. You also may be in a situation where, I'm not saying this is what happened, but by hitting that person back, they wake up out of a situation and maybe won't do it again or something like that and realize it's not a good idea just to hit strangers. I can't say if it's right or wrong, you know what I mean? It's really about what you're taking away from the situation. Oftentimes we think in and I say this all the time, and there's a lot of new people here, so I'll say it again, being a Buddhist is not being a doormat, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that you were, because you're coming at this through a different mind of someone who's trained and someone who says they had a presence of mind there. I'm saying this for other people. You could be on the subway and you'll see somebody attacking, an elderly person, and you can't just say, well, that's their karma and I'm not getting, you're the only person in the car at the time. You may have to step in and do something to defend a person. That's a natural kind of responsibility that, happens, to you out of your own karma. Is it right or wrong? Only you can say that. I think the good takeaway here is that you said you had presence of mind not to react with rage, which takes, that takes a certain level of practice and awareness, and I think that's a good thing. So, that's all I would say to that. What does your daily practice look like? You want to take that?
daily practice looks like. I mean, we use a lot of methods to become aware of the workings of our mind. As Buddhist practitioners who have a teacher for many years, our practice always begins with taking refuge in bodhicitta, setting your mind, setting your intention, knowing that every ounce of your life is going to be spent trying to be aware of everything and making sure that we are benefiting others. That is the one motivation. And then there is the middle part, whatever the practice is, and sometimes we do different kinds of practices. I do a lot of guru yoga, for example. I do some deity yogas practices. Specifically, my personal practice is a practice of Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion. The mantra that involves, it's called the six-syllable mantra that purifies the six realms of sentient beings. A lot of times I do a Tara practice with my very dear friend. We pretty much do the same thing where we do visualizations for purifying all the realms, and each and every practice always concludes with dedication, because whatever merit we gather, we put that drop into the ocean of merit. There are many people practicing in the world at any given moment, beings like our teachers who are realized Buddhas whose practice creates vast oceans of benefit and merit. And so we dedicate our practice at the end of each session and throw our little drop so that the drop doesn't just vanish but becomes a part of the vast ocean. That's what the practice looks like.
How long have you been meditating? 16 years. Recommend a book. There's a list of books on the website, the YouTube, or Solidago Productions, which is where you signed up for this. Solidago. Nick, where are the books? I'm sorry. I should remember these things. I can't remember the email. I can't remember the YouTube channel. And I can't remember where the books are. If you could put that, I get confused on which one's which. I'll repeat that when I see that in the chat function.
Can we ask Nick to put up the photo of the...
Okay, so Solidago Productions, go there. That's where the books are. Meditation with Michael Imperioli is YouTube, and the email is what's the email? Sorry, if we don't get to your questions, because it looks like there's a lot of questions, we probably won't get to it. Michael Imperioli Meditation 101 is the Gmail. Also, anything off topic, I'm not going to answer and waste anyone's time or your time. So just don't waste your time. The Four Immeasurables prayer, you can Google that if that's the thing we say at the beginning. So is that on the website, Nick, the Four Immeasurables prayer? No, that's not. But you can Google it, the Four Immeasurables prayer. You'll find that.
And the Four Immeasurable Prayers is a complete teaching in and of itself. It has the four levels of love and compassion, progressive levels of evolution of our awareness. So it's very, very profound, and it's a beautiful, using it as a mantra, you could really make a whole practice session just saying the four immeasurables. Just always make sure in the end you always dedicate for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Without detail, someone in my life has done something that feels unforgivable to his own children. I recognize he must be suffering to inflict such terrible suffering, but I'm plagued by angry, vengeful thoughts, and I'm having a hard time with them. There's two things to that. That one is I'll address, and then I'll ask Victoria to address. One is the first thing you have to do is, protect the innocent, right? If there's something that you can do to help these children, you have to do that, right? That's important. Like I said, we're not just becoming Buddhists so we can just look at and watch things go on in front of our eyes and not get involved with life because it doesn't, it's like we often have to get our hands dirty in this world, We're engaging in the world. We're not removing ourselves from it. What do you do with the angry, vengeful thoughts?
Well, they're not going to be really useful as long as they remain polluted, because out of pollution, we really can't change anything. we could just pollute more. So the important thing is that when confronting the situation, in order to be able to either protect the children or to change this person's mind so that the situation changes in its totality, you have to make sure that you're doing it from a place of clarity. That does mean that, first the mind, the afflictions have to be subdued, and wisdom has to take place over this emotional kind of stuff. Because when we have afflictions, it's so often mixed with our ego. There's so much of the ego agenda in it. So we cannot really advise anyone, nor can we even act clearly for ourselves to change the course of the situation. But we have to act, obviously. We have to act. So it would be first subduing the afflictive emotions, finding a place of wisdom, understanding, asking yourself, how can I help this person? How can I help these children? Only when we set as a goal the desire to benefit, clarity can happen, and out of clarity, we may have to ask for help of others to be able to address the situation in the proper way. If we feel that we cannot subdue our own afflictions, then we need to rely on the help of others. But if we are able to subdue our own afflictions, then just make sure that when you're speaking, when the sound comes out from your mouth, when you're feeling, that it's not coming from this afflictive place, but from a place of love. And, clearly you're in a situation where something does have to get done. So try to find a place of clarity in your mind, and you will get the right answers on what to do and how to approach it. As I said, calling on help of others sometimes can be very beneficial, and the support could be of immense value.
There's a lot of questions that kind of really speak to exactly what she just said and what this person was asking. So I'm not going to repeat the same questions.
But may I please add one more thing? We just were speaking about these constructs. We have to make sure that we're not looking at that person we want to benefit right now, or we want to even just change the situation with for ourselves. Like, for example, we want to separate from them. Make sure that you're not doing it through that momentary construct where your consciousness became afflicted, through that frozen idea, concept of that person, because that person, as well as we're changing all the time. That's why we can go from stupid to Buddha. If there was no possibility, if impermanence was not there, we would be born stupid and die stupid. But we're here practicing, we're trying to benefit other beings and to become Buddhas. We want to become Buddhas in order to eliminate the suffering of others. We don't want to become Buddhas so we can have like a nice piece of real estate and sit on a lotus smiling and pink. We want to attain the mental state of Buddhahood in order to relieve the suffering of countless beings. And so we keep that in mind. That's what the intention is. And that's what we practice too, for that sake. So make sure that whenever you want to approach and dissolve a difficult situation, that we start it with ourselves, that we dissolve first that difficult moment when that person afflicted us, when that person sparked the fire, they lit up the match and inside created this hydra with 1,000 heads. Make sure that the hydra is dead and the ocean is clear. All the residue of affliction has settled back down into the nature of mind, and now we can be open and present to them. We can only help ourselves, and we can only help someone if the afflictions are settled, when the dust is not driving us insane.
Can you speak to the intersection of Buddhism and social justice, especially pertaining to the oppressive systems of capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy? How do we navigate accepting suffering as inherent to the human condition and separating that from the suffering of many that is at the hands of power and greed of few? Well, we're not accepting suffering as inherent to human nature. Suffering is inherent to human nature, and obviously, yes, through oppressive systems, but also just by being human, because being human means we're going to suffer. We're going to eventually die. Our loved ones will die. The people we love will be separated from us. Whatever system whatever system you live in or live under, you're going to get sick. You're going to have injuries. And everything is impermanent. So it's not about accepting suffering as inherent. It's recognizing the fact that suffering is inherent to human condition, no matter what. If you have the means and the inspiration to oppose these systems by many means, right? By being a teacher, by being a politician, by running for office, by protesting, by all those things, then you should. I'm not sure what else you're trying to speak of. It's like again, it goes back to the doormat question. It's not because you're Buddhist, you're just going like, well, you know, my governor's a racist, and there's nothing I can do about it. Well, there's things you can do about it. You can organize a protest. You can vote. You can, speak out about it. You can, uh, write about it, or march in the streets about it. Whatever. So, but I think the tricky thing here is not to just look at. Often we can say these systems are the problem, and they are, but we also have to look at the oppression in our own minds, how our own negative emotions. It's like, just because we have the wisdom to say that white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism is wrong doesn't mean we're good people. We still have afflictive emotions, we still have aggression, we still have envy, we still have jealousy, and all those things, and we have to tend to that as well, equally as important, maybe more important, in our own lives and in our own world.
And exactly what Michael said, we cannot put fire out with fire. So we start with our inner state. In Buddhism, suffering, that was the first turning of the wheel, and Buddha said that suffering is based on self-grasping. It is the grasping to the idea of me, of the self as something solid, and grasping to phenomena as something solid. That is really kind of the core of ignorance, that what we were speaking about previously, as this belief in these conglomerates as if they do exist. It's very important to start first with examining and extinguishing the fire of affliction inside oneself. Needless to say, these constructs in our social reality exist because of self-grasping, because some people, when they climb out through that very rigid course of concepts, have power over others. There is no question about it. But in order to be able to live productively and create productive change, we have to make sure that we are not a part of the problem, that we are not a part of the construct, that we are not afflicted by hatred or resentfulness or other kinds of things. Just remember also, all these things, they're all pervasively, we can put them all under one word. Everything you said. Uh, Ignorance. Ignorance is the one word for all these political constructs, for inner construct of white supremacists there, and the more solidified the construct of the self becomes, the more rigid, the more abstract, the more less present to others, is the more painful and suffering it is for us and for others. So it's really about kind of like using our mind to deconstruct and to be present. And yes, we do have to have compassion and wisdom to understanding what are these constructs, why they drive and define beings, and how they affect our lives.
Some people experience aphantasia, inability to visualize. At least initially, this seems like it might prevent someone from fully practicing Tibetan Buddhism because it requires visualization. Just curious. I've never, if I've encountered anyone with this, I haven't. I've heard Vajrapride itself doesn't strictly require visualization. No, it doesn't. I mean, if for some reason you do have some condition and you can't visualize things, there's tankas, paintings, statuary that you can, incorporate into your practice. But you don't, those kind of Vajrayana visualization practices are not the only component of Tibetan Buddhism or Buddhism in general. And there's many, many, many methods to Buddhism that go to the same, that approach the same result.
I am curious though when you say visualization. So, for example, if you have craving for something sweet, do you visualize ice cream or chocolate bar? Because our mind has to select something out of the infinite range of possibilities. We kind of have to say to ourselves, oh, I have a sweet craving, so I want the chocolate or I want the ice cream. So I'm sure there are these reference because that's what the mind does all day long. We select and then we act upon these kinds of selections. Are that's what choice is. So when you speak about visualization, it's really not about creating these super big mandalas with 1,000 gatekeepers and etc etc. Really, things could be made much more simpler. I think it's more important keeping bodhicitta and, let's say, visualizing that our teacher is present very near us because we need to be aware that there is that there are Buddhas in our world, so that we can also become aware of our own Buddha nature, and therefore maintain the memory that every being we meet is a Buddha. For that we don't need any kind of giant anything. We just need to feel the presence because we have faith in that.
How do you find a teacher?
You have to read, you have to go to teachings, you have to expose yourself. Everything, of course, starts with the right kind of a desire. If we're looking for a teacher to kind of give us affirmations for the things we want in our life, it's not the right kind of a thing. But if we're looking for someone who is benefiting beings on a limitless kind of a level, who's writing, who's teaching, who's bestowing empowerments, who's giving teachings, etc., someone who's dedicated their life to benefit of others, bring wisdom into the realm of darkness, there are many, many teachers, and it's not difficult to find. Then you go to their teachings. You can start by reading their books. Many, many teachings available on YouTube. You start experimenting and seeing with whom you have this resonance, that person, when you see their face, you hear their voice, your heart too wants to bring happiness and alleviate the suffering of endless sentient beings. When you feel that quality, that person triggers that in you, that it awakens that awareness in you, that's I think when you find your teacher, and then you take refuge.
And where can they find a teacher?
First, I mean, there are many. Look in your local communities. There are always Dharma practices. I would say now with YouTube, you can see so many different Dharma teachers. Look for a teacher always with a great lineage, not someone, like Eckhart Tolle, or someone who's like torn away all these ideas from, 1,000-year-old traditions and just put it into a bestseller. Find a teacher with a lineage imbued with knowledge from the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, and then an uninterrupted stream of teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher. And then look at their teachings on YouTube, read their books, and then see if you can take refuge. Our teacher doesn't have to be someone who lives across the street for that kind of availability. Our teacher is not our psychiatrist. We don't need to have that kind of access to our teacher. Of course, we need to receive teachings and blessings from a teacher, so it has to be someone that we can visit relatively easily, somewhere where we can take the train or fly with the plane, or
Someone
have access to.
someone said subreddits. I guess that's on the Reddit website for Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. One is called Vihara, Vihara. Seems to have pretty credible sanghas listed, many with virtual access. Thank you.
Now many teachers give refuge online and give teachings online. In a weird way, the time of COVID did not just give us this isolation and insulation, but actually opened the world and provided other pathways to connect. We meet in virtual sanghas all the time, just as we're doing it right now.
It's kind of a question that talks about psychopathic behavior, antisocial personality disorder. A psychopath might be able to settle their mind, but loving kindness might not be the outcome.
Settling the mind is not a guarantee. Settling the mind is just clearing the movie screen to see one's own mind,
Right.
to become aware of what is there, what are the dominant qualities of the inner energy that is, because it's our energy that is like open through our mind to receive information, to receive experiences, to engage with the world. We settle our mind in order to become aware about the quality of our inner being. And then we can work with that quality. If we find that we have anger there all the time, we work with that. If we find that we have anxiety, we work with that. If we find we have dissatisfaction and lots of desires, we work with that before we meet the world, before we engage with things, because then we know not to attribute that inner quality onto everything else. We learn in the settling the mind that is our quality. And yes, absolutely, you're right. Just settling the mind is just a preparatory step. It is not the thing itself. It's not even meditation yet. It's not engaging with our mind. It's not transforming our mind. It's not being able to work with our energy. It's just settling. It's like stopping and making space for practice.
Yeah, and then he goes on and says, or she goes on, my impression is that the Buddhist interpretation is that the psychopathic is due to karma. Well, everything's due to karma from a Buddhist perspective. But that answer leaves a little to be desired. Doesn't make a super compelling case that Dharma might benefit a psychopath. I mean, a psychopath, if the person is a psychopath, I mean, I can't speak to any kind of clinical psychology because I don't know anything about that. But let me just finish. But I would say, if a psychopath chooses to practice and and understands that there's a value to practice and a reason to why they should practice, that's a movement in that ice block of psychopathia, I would imagine, that has a possibility for results. But again, I can't speak to the clinical, components of psychopathia.
And I'm not sure if you're using the word psychopath as a judgment or as a clinical valuation. In many ways, the difference is kind of subtle in many ways. Because no matter what, it'll be like an evaluation of someone into a very rigid kind of a construct. As Buddhists, we know that all beings, me, rats, cockroaches, the things that are living, under my floors, in my floors, above my head in the sky, we're all Buddhas. We all have Buddha nature. So we're not distinguished into this and that. We're all sentient beings and we all have Buddha nature. So the movement is to go from whichever condition that we are in right now as a result of karma. And by the way, karma is a river that's continuously being constructed and deconstructed. We are building karma with each word and each breath, and we're still mopping up the karmic results from previous lives with every breath and every movement. But practice is the path for us to go from our present condition to the condition of the mind, which is completely awakened from the dream of ignorance, and that is Buddhahood. And that is for all of us sentient beings to come to that place. So practice is like, do we need to breathe to be alive? It's the same thing as to say, do we need practice or do we need to change our mind and to go from the condition of ignorance to awakening? Yes, it's for all of us. There are no restrictions who should practice and who should not.
Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much. If you were new, again, on the website, Solidago Productions, there's books and teachers. There's teachers that we mentioned, and you should Google them and look at their books and get their books, either buy them or the library or online. Look at their teachings. There's lots of them on YouTube. If any of this stuff inspires you,
The photo.
we will dedicate. What?
The photo. Some time ago, many of you have donated to a charity in Tibet that
Pure Land Project.
Pure Land Project that supports several schools, old age home, birthing center, etc., etc. Nick, can we please post the picture? So these were the coats and the hats, and there's no picture, but they're also the shoes that all the children received from the donations.
Yeah.
Thank you all, because it was extremely important. The kids all need, obviously, new coats, hats, gloves, new shoes every single year, and the climate in Tibet is very, very harsh. So thank you all for being generous.
Yeah, that was really kind and generous, and very helpful to the children in the Gar Valley, Gar Monastery, where Garchen Rinpoche's monastery is. We'll close by dedicating the merit from today's session for the benefit of all beings. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara
and conquer
and
the
its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death.
death.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
Our producer, who without we could not do this class. See you next week.